Well, Ellen Ratner is our bureau chief at the Talk Radio News Service in Washington, D.C., and there's a lot going on. And Ellen, we were just talking to Dr. Michael Rushneck from Americans for Healthcare about why the issue of health reform in the United States ought not to be politicized, and why doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals are the ones who should be at least advising the nation on how to remedy whatever discrepancies, failings there are in the health system. But unfortunately, it is being politicized, and I guess we're on the cusp of a vote to repeal what we call Obamacare now in the House.
Well, first of all, you know, it's interesting. We are in probably about a half hour from when you and I are talking. If somebody re-listens to this later, it'll be done. There is going to be a vote on repealing this Obamacare. What's so interesting, of course, is we called it Hillary help when she was in charge. But in fact, Obama had very little to do with the writing of this bill. It's actually done in Congress. He decided to do something different than Hillary Clinton did. She wrote the bill, and then they had somebody, or her team wrote the bill, and then they had somebody in Congress file it. This time, Obama took a very different tack and had Congress fight it out in committee, etc. Pretty much a year long in debate. It's still being labeled Obamacare.
And it's interesting because normally after an election, after a vote, after a legislation is put into place, we say, okay, the fight is over, we move on to something else. But in this case, in what the Democrats are positioning as a vitriolic move that really has no substance, because the Republicans surely know this will not pass in the Senate, and even if it were by some stretch of the imagination to pass the Senate, would never survive a veto by President Obama. But yet here they go with this vote today.
Well, that's right, but they promised their constituency, the people that voted them, that they were going to vote on this, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, they are our representatives.
So I agree. And they don't really have anything to replace it. And while I know you spoke with that physician about it, you know, it's so interesting. My health care bill, I'm an individual. I lost my eye. I'm a few months away from 60 years old, can't get Medicare. And lo and behold, I got my new bill, and it was $1,670 a month.
A month?
Now, how do you pay that? You don't. I mean, essentially what you say is that you're going to completely and totally not deal with it, and that you're going to try, I'm going to get catastrophic care. Because I had a thyroid condition last summer. They had to pre-approve my test, and as soon as they pre-approved it, it showed very positive that I had disease. They disapproved it.
See, and this is the kind of thing, these are the kind of stories we should be discussing, rather than is it creating jobs or whether it is taking jobs away. Is it going to cost the country more, or is it going to cost the country less? We need to hear more stories like this about individuals and how it affects them. And ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, if you are regular participants in this program, the person reporting is not a deadbeat individual who is out on the welfare lines when she could be working, as has been portrayed by a lot of people. Get a job, get a job. Well, she has a job, and look at her situation. Let's switch very quickly to the president of China, who I guess is not used to dealing with anybody but state-run media. He was asked a couple pointed questions about human rights in China by reporters. I believe the first question posed by the Associated Press, and he just turned his hearing aid off.
I wish he could ask more pointed questions, because in my view, they offered him a softball option. They did not specifically name prisoners by name. They did not talk about the AP reporter did not mention the prisoner that got the Nobel Peace Prize, and did not mention Falun Gong at all. And so they just kind of let him go on, and he knew he was going to be asked that. You know, he was asked that during the Clinton administration when he did a press conference, because I was there. And he had pretty much the same answer. So he knew he was going to be asked that.
Well, this really leads to a question that transcends even the failure to really ask a tough question of a visiting president, and that is, what has happened to your colleagues up there in Washington, D.C., and maybe my colleagues here in New York and across the nation? I mean, it used to be that we very proudly asked very difficult questions of people in positions of responsibility and power, and no wonder maybe that people are turning away from the news media, the traditional news media, for their source of news these days.
Right. I mean, I've never been at a news conference with President Hu, and it's very interesting that in China they call him Chairman Hu, but of course we don't call him that. And I asked when I was in China in October, why don't you call him President? Why don't we call him Chairman? Oh, it's just a translation issue. No, it's not a translation issue.
No, it's not.
Translation
no,
issue.
It's not.
We don't do it because of the images that evokes of Chairman Mao.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So do you think that President Obama is going to be pushing human rights? It would seem to me, given the monetary situation and both governments a little bit paranoid about the other, not so much over weapons any longer, but more so over the economic war that is going on, that human rights will take a back seat.
Well, I definitely think human rights are taking a back seat, although the president did mention the Dalai Lama, and President Chairman Hu did not. So that was kind of interesting. He pointedly avoided it.
I give President Obama credit for bringing that up. Now, the Chinese want a new gold standard, and it's not the greenback. How successful will they be? Is there anything that President Obama can do to mitigate that? And is it really a threat to our economic system if Russia and China and others no longer use the American dollar as the main standard?
You know, you're above my pay grade on this one, very honestly. I understand somewhat about the debt and the debt they hold, but in terms of when we get into gold standard and all that, I'm afraid I think you need a good economist to help you with this one, because that is a very complicated issue. And I've wrapped my mind around their debt issues, but not around the gold standard issues. I apologize.
No, don't apologize, because I will tell you what I have always said, and when I was on your side of the microphone, working as a correspondent for CNN Radio, I was never afraid to say I don't know when I was questioned by a radio station, because better you should acknowledge you don't know the answer to a question than try to BS your way through and be wrong, God forbid. Speaking of which, our good friends at NPR were wrong about Congresswoman Gifford being dead, and they reported it, and we saw in the interview with Diane Sawyer how heart-wrenching that was to her husband, Mark Kelly. I mean, what happened? I believe NPR holds itself to a higher standard than some of the other media and has a reputation, richly earned and deserved, of doing so. But I mean, whatever happened to being right rather than being first? I mean, it's great to be first, but don't we have a responsibility to be right?
I think we do, but hey, what do I know? I really, I was just shocked, because clearly they saw that she was shot in the head, and then they just jumped to a conclusion.
Well, they did have sources, but I'll tell you what, here's a real good suggestion to us as people in the media and to others in the media. If the source won't identify themselves on the record for you to attribute, don't use it. Wait till you find somebody who you can attribute it to, because obviously whoever it was at the sheriff's department who releases erroneous information is not at the hospital, is not a doctor, is not qualified to declare somebody dead, and even if he were qualified to declare somebody dead, didn't see the body to declare her dead. And NPR should have, and they acknowledge this, and I give them credit. They are acknowledging their failings. Anybody who's interested should go to their website and read the Ombudsman's report. It is scathing, and I give them a lot of credit for turning the microscope on themselves. But it should be a lesson to all of us. I took you over time by a couple of minutes. I apologize for that. Ellen Ratner, thanks for joining us from Washington. Talk Radio News Service, Washington Bureau, Ellen Ratner on News Talk Online on the Pal Talk News Network.
Thank you.
Thank you.